welcome to this special episode of Money, Money, Money. I'm Surabhi Upadhyay. Now, retirement is something that we all have in mind when we are thinking long-term wealth creation, which is why this week on the show, we are going to focus on this very simple subject: how to create the perfect retirement plan. And I'll tell you what, beyond the Bitcoin and the crypto talk and the tech startups and all things jazzy, sometimes the simplest things work the best when you're talking about long-term sustainable wealth creation, which is why we go back to the basics. And this week on the show, we are looking at the Employee Provident Fund as well as the National Pension Scheme. Which one is a better tool? How should you divide your money in both of them? Well, to discuss that and much more, our guests have joined us. Preeti Chandrasekhar of Mercer India is with us on the show this week, as well as Harshvardhan Rungta of Rungta Securities. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining in. So, you know, this is that ultimate goal of every smart PF plan. You want to have a great life when you retire, and you want to retire early. So, Preeti, you kick it off. First thoughts on just the concept and deciding how much money do I need to save?
Thanks a lot, Surabhi, for inviting me on to the show. Let me start with how much does one need when one retires. A very simple, perhaps a replacement rate for the income is about 70% of your pre-retirement. 70 to 80% of the pre-retirement income is what you need when you actually retire. So that's a rule of thumb. And generally, if you see company-sponsored plans typically account for a replacement rate about 30 to 40% or even lower if your company restricts the Provident Fund corpus to just about 15,000 contribution, or you've moved jobs and you've sort of taken up the gratuity amount and just spent it, and you're not with NPS. With that, it ranges anywhere between a 25 to at best 50%. So very clearly, there's a gap of 20 to 30%. And this, I'm assuming that you're using all of it for annuity and not actually looking at taking of the lump sum. Coming to the next point on how much corpus. First rule of thumb is 25 times of what you need as an annual salary, and you would assume a 4% withdrawal for the next 20 years. There could be variations, but generally you would expect a 4% withdrawal at a minimum, and perhaps not go beyond 8%, because beyond that you will consume your capital away.
Preeti,
so that's my take on it.
Preeti, did you just say 25 times of your annual salary? Gosh, I'm already getting a headache thinking about it.
So it's 20. So it's 25 times what you need post-retirement. So let's say hypothetically, I require, let's say 20 lakh rupees per annum when I retire as an expense. I would need to have a corpus of 25 times that 20 lakhs is what I meant.
Okay, got that.
So that's a fairly big amount.
Yes, those are big targets we're already working with. So, Harsh, the floor is open for you now. How do we, that's why I guess that's the reason why people are rushing to all things exotic. You want to know if crypto is going to make you that kind of money, or is it just pure equities where you need to be? Everybody wants that multi-bagger. But that's why it's important to get back to the basics. And I think of the EPF, again, this year they're offering 8.5% interest. It's absolutely locked in, rock steady. And therefore, the need for this show to ask whether sometimes simple things just work better.
Well, Surabhi, the first point is very clear. You very rightly said that, while we may look at exotic products, we may look at products which, promise or they look to have potentials which will generate exponential returns. You need to make sure that, a very large chunk of your investment corpus is into, conventional, traditional, non-exotic products. So while you may have some exposure of say 5 or 10% into exotic products, but that should not be forming the core portion of your portfolio, and especially for a goal which is retirement. So if you're planning for retirement, you cannot depend upon cryptos and all those things to fund your retirement. No, certainly not. So you'll have to look at certain other conventional products for a goal which is as important as retirement. If you're looking at general wealth creation purposes, you're looking at an exotic holiday. So you may just simply have a product which is matching to something like this, a crypto or something else for that matter. If it works well for you, great. You go on that holiday. If it does not work, then you do not go on. But retirement is not something that you can be dependent upon. Now, I'd just like to add a little, if you permit me. I'd just like to add into the first question that you had about what's the likelihood of, what's the corpus kind of requirement. So you did express shock upon the fact that whatever your current expenses are, they're going to go up at the time of retirement. Yes. So when you're calculating a retirement corpus, Surabhi, you need to be very clear in your head that there are certain considerations that you put into place. So one is, of course, what is your current, monthly expenditure? Then you take into consideration the projected inflation rate that you will see before retirement. You project and you take into consideration the projected inflation post-retirement, because even after retirement, your cost of living is going to go up. You're going to take what is the likelihood of the returns that you get, both on the investments that you make today
Sure.
and post-retirement.
Sure.
You're going to take into consideration the lifespan. Putting all this together, you can safely assume that 8 to 10 times or whatever your current expenses are, that's going to be your requirement in the first year of retirement.
Okay. We basically need to set aside a fair amount of money and make sure that we have that corpus when we're approaching, age 60 or earlier if we choose to retire early. So here's what we'll do. Let's quickly go over the features of the EPF scheme as it stands. And by the way, this year there's a tax change for contributions above 2.5 lakh rupees. The interest is going to become taxable. And then we'll, do the same for the NPS and then compare the two. So let's start with the EPF. And Preeti, that's the first question. Just go over the current setup. I think it's 12% of basic, and that's how much I contribute, how my employer contributes, and then how this new tax implication is going to play out this year.
So one thing I would like to say, Surabhi, is that EPF is a very simple savings vehicle that is very attractive to help save the working class on a regular basis. Now, if you just depend upon EPF alone to look at your 70 to 80% of your last drawn salary pre-retirement to be able to take care of you, as I said before, it will just perhaps account for 25 to 30%. So clearly, EPF is not the only vehicle. So coming back to your question on what is happening, what are the tax changes, etc., I would just like to talk a bit about the tax changes, in terms of what has happened. As per the government data, only 0.27% of the subscribers would get affected by this rule. So clearly, we are not talking about the masses. And as tax regimes change, right? I mean, I will not expect the same tax regime for 30 years of my employment, or perhaps more. We've seen how things have changed from dividends, from stocks and mutual funds, how they're treated, long-term capital gains, etc. So one can really not expect the tax regime to continue the way it is forever. Now, going back to the EPF, I would think that EPF would continue to be attractive for the largest sector of the population. That will continue. What will perhaps change is for the top layer of the population, where they have choices of other instruments, and rightly so, they would perhaps look at other options where they can get a better return, which is more attractive from a tax standpoint.
Okay. So, Harsh, your thoughts on the EPF, and the fact is that for a lot of, the high income earners, there was this whole tendency to contribute a lot more than just the 12%, right? Everybody was looking at the voluntary provident fund route as well. Does that still make sense to you? And the nuances around that, because even there's this 7.5 lakh rupee cap that was introduced, I think, the year before. So then should we contribute more to our EPF than what is mandatory by the company?
Well, Surabhi, you picked up an absolutely relevant question. So the question now arises because there is from effective 1st April 2021, any contribution made in excess of 2.5 lakhs by the employee, all the interest that you earn on that excess amount over 2.5 lakhs will be taxable now. So even post-tax, if you look at the post-tax returns, it's about 6% post-tax if you're in a 30% tax bracket. So, well, in that context, if you compare an apple to apple, you will see that 6% post-tax is still better than any other debt instrument, wherein you're getting about, say, 5.5-6% as a taxable income. Now the question arises, is there another avenue to invest? Yes, if you're looking at long-term wealth creation, we've always maintained that equities over long term do help you beat inflation conveniently, and that is the right way to accumulate your corpus for retirement. So very clearly, if you're going to be investing more than 2.5 lakhs, if you're happy with a 6% kind of a post-tax return as of today, tomorrow the interest rates may go down and that will be impacted. But as of today, post-tax return of 6%. If you're happy with that, most certainly, yes, you can continue. It is still far better than any other debt instrument. But for a longer period of time, equities will have to be included into your portfolio to fill in that gap of what is required to what you're going to accumulate.
Okay. Preeti, just explain the nuance to us on the 7.5 lakh rupee cap. I mean, one can contribute as much as you want, right? I don't think there's any cap on that. But the tax benefits go away for the employee above 2.5 lakhs of contribution on the interest, and then the 7.5 lakh cap, because that's from the employer's point of view. And I believe it goes beyond just the EPF. So if you could just explain the details there.
So yes, that's correct, Surabhi. So the 7.5 lakhs that we're talking about, it includes all kinds of contributions towards any kind of a superannuation or pension. So that includes provident fund, that includes even your DC superannuation. Everything put together cannot go above 7.5 lakh from an employer contribution standpoint, which sort of takes us back to the point on, do you keep all your eggs in one basket? Do you consciously only look at these vehicles, or can you look? And this is primarily going to affect, as I said earlier, the top bracket, income bracket people, and not so much the regular employees at all. So definitely one needs to look at other avenues to be able to see how they can better manage their retirement corpus.
Okay, got that. Now, this is just one part of the equation, the EPF. The other part is NPS, and that's where market returns king. So then, is that a better bet? We take the discussion forward after this short break. Welcome back. Here with us on Money, Money, Money. And this week we are focusing on retirement and asking the question that if you have extra cash, should you be parking it in the EPF or in the NPS? So now let's start by understanding the structure of the national pension system. Just help us identify this, Preeti, because we all remember, but it's good to jog memory. There is a tier 1 account in NPS, there's a tier 2 account. You can invest in a mix of, I think, equities, government securities. But how does it all work and how many shifts are allowed? So just go over the architecture for us once again.
Yes, sure. So NPS is a very open architecture. It is, again, going back to the basics. It's a defined contribution scheme, but it is not tied to an employer. It is completely portable. It is completely flexible. And what it does is it gives attractive tax concessions to employees on specific contributions. It gives certain attractive tax concessions to the employer also for contributing along with the employee. It has flexibility in terms of 3 options. Basically, both employer and employee can contribute. And I'm talking right now about the corporate NPS program. Both employer and employee can contribute equally. Only one of them can contribute, or they can also contribute unequally. So that is a kind of structure it has as far as contribution is concerned. The entry age is anywhere between 80 to 70 years. And what it also says is you can actually commence the benefit from age 60. It can be deferred to 70. And there are certain conditions on the benefit payments, because they're saying that a minimum 40% has to be taken as an annuity, and a maximum 60% of it can be actually taken as commuted value. The entire amount can actually be taken as annuity also. And you have certain annuity service providers who will ensure that the annuity payout is very smooth. It really is a proof of the pudding. There are certain exit criteria. You can normally exit at the age of 60. And the premature is also allowed with an 80% annuity purchase and a 20% lump sum. There's a partial withdrawal also allowed after 3 years. So it's fairly flexible in that sense. And on an investment mode, you actually have an active choice. So you can actively look at the asset classes and the proportions in the asset classes which you actually invest in. If you don't want to do anything, you have the auto choice. And as I said, there are attractive tax rebates for the employee contribution as well as the employer contribution. Another significant thing is you have a DC superannuation scheme. Very recently, it was allowed to actually pot that money, wind up your participation in DC superannuation, actually pot that money into NPS so that it helps you channelize all your retirement savings through a single vehicle. And easier for you to manage in that sense. So this is just about a sum of the kind of facilities or benefits that are available under the NPS program.
Okay,
and it's shown very good returns also.
So just to sum it up, I mean, you have the tier 1 account, the tier 2 account. Tier 1 is, of course, the main primary account. And then, as Preeti mentioned, there are several options. You can go for the auto choice, wherein, depending on your age, your equity allocation will keep changing. It'll keep gradually coming down as you grow older. Or if you think you're savvy enough to do your own mix, then that is something that's offered by the NPS. But now, Harsh, let's talk about first the flexibility of it, because at no point in time, even if you stay in that scheme till 60 years of age, will you get full access to your money. At best, you get 60%. With the balance 40, you still have to buy annuity, and that comes as a monthly regular income. If there is a premature withdrawal, then there are more restrictions that you'll have to buy a higher portion of annuities, etc. So from that standpoint, does it make sense to you?
Well, Surbhi, my take on NPS has particularly been that this is a product essentially for people who are not confident or who are not from the, who are not financially savvy. This I'm talking about if you're planning as a regular citizen of the country, opening up an NPS account purely from an investment point of view to fund your retirement. In case you're doing it for tax advantages, etc., it's a different equation altogether. So my personal take is that because there are so many restrictions in accessing your capital, at age 60, you can at best get 60% of the accumulated corpus. 40%, as you said, has to be converted into an annuity. Now, annuity rates will be determined at that point in time by the annuity provider, which are essentially the life insurance company. Now, if I have to lock in my money and decide at that point in time what is the annuity I'm going to get, and if I was financially savvy, I'd rather have the fund to myself and use another mechanism to fund my retirement. I could use higher equity allocations even post-retirement. It's a myth that you cannot be invested in the equities post-retirement. You could have lower allocations. I could do an SWP, a systematic withdrawal plan. I could buy a property, put it on rent. Now, there could be several options to get regular income. So if you're financially savvy, you understand and can manage money, I think you're better off, not being into a scheme which has a lock-in or restriction in withdrawal. However, having said that, there is a large portion of the population who are not from financial backgrounds. They could be engineers, doctors. They could be different professions. They're very good in their own fields. But if you're not confident about managing money on your own, then NPS, of course, is one of the most efficient and cost-effective way to save for retirement.
Just a second, returns is also really important. Preeti, comment on this, or maybe Harsh, if you want to quickly comment, because we only have 2-3 minutes left. It's very important to look at cost and expected returns from any investment vehicle, right? And Preeti, you were telling me before the show that the cost element is much, much lower in the NPS. Is that right? How much lower? But then what about return? I mean, I don't want to feel shortchanged at the end of a long waiting period, realizing that the fund manager didn't manage my money well.
Yes, that's true, Surbhi. So the cost element, if you see this, I would think that this is perhaps the cheapest program of this kind in the whole world, because your cost could be a little bit high when actually the assets under management are lower, because you're talking about the lower income bracket. But for the higher income bracket, they could be as low as a 0.2%. And compare that to any other instruments. You talk of mutual funds, etc. So when Harsh is saying that this is for the masses, I would completely agree that this is actually a good way of starting to build something clearly. And then depending upon your investable surpluses, you can actually look at other things. And in terms of returns, if you look at the kind of returns we're talking about, a 5-year average for the equities had been about upwards of 8+. And for corporate bonds, it has been about upwards of 10+. And for government bonds, it's been upwards of 11+. And that is a significant thing that we're talking about. And you're also seeing that NPS is now also allowing investment in alternative assets up to 5%. So really, it is actually trying to compete in the market with some of the other financial instruments for retirement plan.
Which is where we investors end up being confused. And now we're down to the most important question of this conversation, this entire show. And this is a simple one. So Harsh, I'm throwing it right back at you. For a working professional who's savvy but busy, doesn't have the time, suddenly feels that they've got an increment or they've got some extra cash in hand, there's already an EPF investment happening because that's mandatory in most companies. Then where should that extra cash go? Should it go to the NPS? Should it plow back to the voluntary provident fund? How do you cut it up?
Well, Surbhi, up to 2.5 lakhs per annum, you most certainly should use the EPF, wherein if your employer contribution in that context, your mandatory contribution is say 1.5 lakhs, then make sure that you go for additional voluntary provident fund contribution of about 8,000 per month. So that makes it 2.5 lakhs. So up to 2.5 lakhs, no questions asked. The tax-free return on an EPF is the most superior form of debt allocation. And anything over and above that, if I remove the restrictions that an NPS puts in, NPS is a good product minus the restrictions. And if you don't like the restrictions, like I don't like that restriction, if I were to invest, I don't have an NPS account and nor do I intend to open one. I would look at a more flexible wealth creation option, such as a long-term equity allocation, where I can manage my equity allocations as well. I can choose the schemes. I can do all that bit. So for financially savvy, you can look at mutual funds or any other investment product to accumulate that corpus for retirement. Post-retirement, use it the way you want to. You could buy an annuity post-retirement.
Absolutely. It gives you more control. I totally get that point. Preeti, your final thoughts and your advice. What would you personally do?
See, it all depends upon what kind of an investor are you. Are you a conservative investor and want stability? And what stage in your life you are in. If you are nearing retirement, you want to be perhaps less aggressive, and also depends upon how smart I have been all through my career in terms of investing, how much time I have and how much I need to really be able to invest to build that corpus. That's the first thing. The second one is, as I said, NPS allows more asset allocation freedom. But apart from the returns, I would also think that, there's a mindset that many of us have that NPS is all equity and EPF is all bonds. Because very recently, if you see, you must have, read the news that EPFO may also start investing a portion of its annual deposits in infrastructure investment funds. So basically, that's a part of the alternative asset classes. And the second thing is the returns. Returns on NPS are market linked, and VPF is not market linked right now because of the way the accounting is done. So, moment that kind of a correction happens, you will see them very aligned to each other in terms of the return. So then it will all come back to, tax at that point in time, what is more attractive. And as I said, the tax regime can sort of change in any number of times in my 25, 30 years of employment. So my final take is don't put all your eggs in one basket. And another thing is, let's not look at others and actually what you call a bandwagon effect. Let us look at what is relevant to us and not be influenced by what we read in papers and sort of what somebody else is doing.
Absolutely. Bite off only as much as you can chew and make sure you digest it well. Thank you very much, Preeti, as well as Harsh, for joining in and giving us some more food for thought on this very important subject, retirement planning through these two big schemes, the EPF and the NPS. With that, it's a wrap on this week's edition of Money, Money, Money. Many thanks for watching. See you again with another theme next week.